Hey guys, we have a very big question today. It's about estrangement, and she has a specific question for you, which is when someone close to you, it's her parents in this case, hurt you so deeply, but they're not willing to acknowledge what they've done to you, how do you move on? So at the end, I'll give you my 2 cents. I'll also have a book recommendation that I find, or that I believe would be really helpful in this case. So here we go. She says, I have been estranged from my parents for close to 5 years now. I have not engaged at any capacity, but have dealt with difficulties such as disparaging false narratives said about myself and my husband to other family members. There was an incident where they followed her and her kids and attempted to block in her car. And more recently, they mailed a notebook from her childhood where in the notebook she had written, I'm so ashamed that I disappointed my parents. I hope to someday make them proud. And then they put a Post-it note on this notebook and said, thought you might want this. She has grown a lot from this distance, and she's really seen things differently, how dysfunctional they are and their behavior is, especially her mother. Here's the major thing that happened that led to the estrangement. The major event that caused me to go no contact had to do with a family home. After my Nana passed, there was discussions with my family, and it was decided that my husband and I would sell our first home of 5 years and move into my Nana's home. The price was agreed upon, and we were going to be able to save money and live in a safer neighborhood. After about a year of cleaning out and fixing up my Nana's home, we received an eviction notice from her parents, who bought the home out from under them once the Nana's estate was settled. They lost everything, you guys. Oh my gosh. And then, so they had put the money from the sale of their first home into fixing up Nana's home. Her parents never lifted a finger, never went through a box, and her husband were counting on that equity that they were building into Nana's home going forward in life. And instead, they had to go to court, face an eviction, and her parents ended up selling the house and making well over $150,000 after all of their hard work. Since then, she hasn't talked to them, and years have gone by, and she's navigated. 2 things. First, it's been 5 years, and you're asking, when people close to you have wronged you so deeply, how can you move on? Because they refuse to acknowledge. I'm wondering, are you thinking move on with them in your life, like you're waiting for that conversation of them to acknowledge what they've done to you? Or are you saying like, how can I stop feeling so much like either guilt or, like your younger self said in here, shame, because I am estranged from them, and just move on with my life? Like, I'll never get what I want anyway. Like, they're never going to acknowledge it. Like, how do I do this? In both ways that you're asking this question, I recommend this book. It's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. Highly recommend this book for this, and I recommend therapy. I recommend therapy because part of the process of going through like a traumatic event is making sense of it. For me, if this was happening to me, my question would be, how could my mom and dad do this? Like, I have children. I could never imagine doing this to my children. And I would have to make sense of how 2 people could do that to their child. And I know that therapy would help me make sense of that and talk about emotional intelligence levels. They would talk about how some people, like as we go through teenage years, our vernacular is pointed inwards and we're all about ourselves. It's me, 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 how the world impacts me. We're very selfish, and that at some point in our development, our vernacular flips out, and then all of a sudden we're aware that there's a world around us and how our actions impact everyone around us, and we're more empathetic and courteous and conscientious. And some people, unfortunately, like in our lives, the vernacular never flips out. And so even though you're looking at like someone in their 50s, you might be dealing with someone who is emotionally 12. So I do a podcast episode, I think it was episode 7, you might want to check that out. It's about high conflict personalities, but I talk about the vernacular thing in that episode. My thing also in therapy would be, how do I learn how to cope with the negative feelings and emotions that come up from the estrangement? So when I feel guilt, because it'll just intrusively come into my body, how do I cope with it? Because even though it comes in without your permission, you get to choose what to do with it. And those coping mechanisms would be learned in therapy. But let's say you are asking, how could I even possibly move on with family members if they're never willing to acknowledge what they've done to me? Like, how can I do that? Personally, my husband and I, when my husband was estranged from his family, we had to get to a place of acceptance, knowing that his parents could not, they just, for whatever reason, they could not see it our way. Like, they couldn't. And so once we realized, like, it was impossible for them to see it our way, we had to accept the fact that we would never truly get what we thought we needed in order to heal. And then we just figured out, what boundaries do we need to feel okay being in relationship with them so that we can move forward. That would also be done in therapy. You could do that in therapy, figuring out, okay, how do I accept that I may never get what I believe I need in order to heal, which is acknowledgement and validation to what they did to me. How can I ever accept this? And you would also talk about, in therapy, you talk about forgiveness. And you would talk about how forgiveness is a gift to yourself, not necessarily the person that wronged you. All that's done in therapy. And then you would also talk about, like, what boundaries do you need to keep yourself, your relationship, and your family feeling safe so that you can function close enough, like on a superficial level, within like their world of possible dysfunction. So those are my insights on this very sad situation. Again, the book that I recommend that I feel like would be so helpful is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. So now, Mind Your Boundary community, let her know your insights and your perspectives. Thank you so much.